Welcome to the Rabia and Sana Show. We're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Piracha. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose. And I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Rabia and Sana Show. So today's episode is a little bit different than how we normally do them. Today we're going to get up close and personal with Rabia and Rabia's journey on what led her to reinvent cultural norms. So I'm so excited about this, Rabia, today. You know, we've been talking for so long, but there's so many things in your journey of reinventing cultural norms that I don't know still. And so really looking forward to it.
Me too, and thanks, Sana. It's really exciting to be on this journey, and there's so many parts to it. I don't think I can ever fully capture it in one sitting, but there are lots of things that really made this journey so meaningful, and I'm excited to share with you and everyone.
Tell us a little bit about how was it for you growing up? What came to cultural norms? Like, did you guys follow them, or like, how was your upbringing?
So my upbringing was somewhere between traditional and progressive, not quite one or the other. At home, we were very, like in terms of how we spoke at home, we spoke Urdu always. My parents made it a point of always speaking Urdu. So the culture was there. My mother wore kameez shalwar at home. So that was there. We ate Desi food every day. Roti salan was our dinner time thing. And what other cultural things? Like we celebrated Eid, observed Ramadan. And for as long as my dad was alive, the dinners were always together. And dinner time was really special because often my father would pick a topic that was meaningful to him and we would discuss it. Sometimes it was a surah from the Quran. I think looking back, I think those things that he shared with us were meaningful and relevant to him.
Yeah.
But he just would make a dinner time conversation. And yeah, so in those aspects, very culturally traditional, but there were lots of untraditional cultural things that happened as well. So my father was reinventing some things within our culture, but as a result of his life experience, so he lost his mother at a very young age, and he was, he didn't live with his nuclear family, his parents. And so because he was brought up in different with his grandmother and other uncles and aunts, he really emphasized the value of family to us. And he would also, because he didn't have a mother's love, he would always tell us how much he loved us. He was a big hugger, so he would hug every day, either when he got home from work or when I got home from somewhere. I always remember him wrapping his arms around me and telling me that he loved me, that I was the apple of his eyes, like things like that. So my mom was more traditional as a mom, the nurturer. My dad provided, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So that's also very cultural.
Yeah. I feel like, in our Desi culture, we don't really, from parents' side, show affection that much. So that's interesting that you say that your dad was very affectionate in that sense, especially sometimes from fathers, right? I think we don't really show affection physically like that in the Desi culture.
Yeah, exactly. There was a gentleman by the name of Leo Bascalia.
Okay.
And he used to come on PBS all the time. Like I grew up in Canada, so I didn't grow up in Pakistan. So living in Canada, you do get influences, right, from other sources to impact that culture or the culture that you are used to. So there was this man called Leo Buscaglia, and he talked about the value of saying "I love you."
Mm.
And my dad really watched him like regularly on PBS. And so that influence, and I think he did read, he has a few books as well. And so those books and watching him really opened him up to be culturally different or creating a new way of that expression of affection and love. So that's very untraditional.
That is, yeah. Sounds like your dad sort of like created that path for you with the lead by example that he did that. And did you have that mindset growing up that I have to follow these cultural norms or I have to follow a predetermined path for me? Or was this something like it was more of a progressive Western type of lifestyle that you had growing up and the mindset?
So I think there was a lot of unspoken understanding.
Okay.
That we saw it, but it wasn't overtly spoken about. Most of my upbringing, we saw the traditional food and how the family was, how we always did things together or sat in the family room after dinner time. Like it would, these things were just, I didn't know what culture was, that we had a different culture because I hadn't seen anything different.
Yeah.
So that was, for us, that was normal. But I didn't know that these things were carried on from our culture.
Yeah.
So no one actually said, this is your Pakistani culture and this is how things are going to be done. That instruction wasn't given.
Yeah.
So many
It's
things
usually
that were
not. Yeah, it's not given ever.
but it's supposed to be understood. So there was there was this unspoken understanding, but then often kind of shocking because the understanding wasn't clear.
Okay, so tell me, Rabia, what was it? What was that turning point for you? What was it that really made you understand that this is the cultural norms that I am not going to follow?
So in the time when I was going through it, nothing overtly was about reinventing cultural norms. But looking back, and everything is, in hindsight, everything is 2020. In the interim, it's very foggy. And so I didn't have that awareness that I'm going to be reinventing cultural norms. But there were a few things that happened in my life, events that happened that really shaped. And now looking back, as a result of those experiences, what I was doing later was reinventing cultural norms, not in the moment. So one thing that happened was our upbringing. It was very nurturing and caring. We had a lovely, stable home. It was peaceful. My brother and sister and I, we used to fight like brothers and sisters fight, but overall, it was very peaceful. I didn't see my parents fighting a lot. Do recall some, but I don't recall many. They really showed us that what's private in your room between the two people. So these were all things we saw, but never were we told this is how you do things. And so and I think my kids say this to me today, that we learn from what you do, not from what you say.
Yeah.
So just having that was that solid, stable, peaceful family unit, and that close knit was really important. Like for me, I really appreciate that. And then my father was diagnosed with cancer. So we had to experience loss. I was 18.
You were 18 when he was diagnosed?
I was 18 when he was diagnosed. I was just about to turn 19. So we were very young, meaning for our family, we had never experienced this type of like losing or knowing that your father is dying of cancer.
Yeah.
To hear it at that age, it was a shocking moment for our family and for me. And so that was really huge. But between the time, like when I was being brought up and my dad's diagnosis, there was something happened that changed my life, which was my engagement.
Mm.
So there were no forewarnings that that's what was going to happen to me. And generally, I think families may start talking about it after a child turns 13, after a girl turns 13. But for me, it was at 13.
Wow.
So there was no warning that this is what's going to happen. There was always the emphasis on education, not on becoming a wife.
That's really surprising. So no expectation, no idea, anything at all.
Right, none. And so anyway, so that was another thing. And then being married in Pakistan, when I did get married at 19, and I got married because my father was dying of cancer, and the whole family came to see him. And literally, one way that I see it is that I fulfilled my father's last wish. And going back, if I could do it again, I would do the same thing again. And because that's how much my father means to me, and at the time meant to me. And so that was really important. And then living in Pakistan shaped my life really in a way that I didn't expect it to. And then leaving that marriage, taking that decision to leave, was really incredible. It was scary, and it was not sure if I'm doing the right thing, but I kind of felt like it was the right thing to do. Like, there were no, I wasn't in a physically abusive marriage, and I don't think that there were a lot of cultural norms and acceptable unhealthy behaviors that were there, but nothing overtly, like people didn't see bruises on me. But I was grieving from my father's loss. So I lost my father. That was another big event. But then later, after the divorce, or after leaving, the next thing is that me finding liberation after my divorce, that really shaped me. And so I was going through life just randomly doing things, not so focused. And then in my 30s, which is after I came back with 2 kids, I've had 2 kids and they've really shaped my life as well. I was the rebel, really pushing boundaries. And that's actually, in hindsight, that's when I started to sort of reinvent cultural norms. And in hindsight, again, as I'm reflecting, I'm understanding that there's an inner culture and an outer culture. And in the rebellious phase that I went through in my 30s, what I was exploring was my inner culture, which didn't match my outer culture, which sometimes was defiant of with my South Asian culture. And so that was really, in this reflection, in fact, I've had it recently, this inner culture, I was trying to find harmony within myself and also be a part of my culture. But there was this, I didn't know what I was doing in the time. So, you ask, when did you know? I knew much later, in my 40s, actually, that I had to change things up because it wasn't working the way I was doing things. And I had very little self-value. My self-worth was really low. I didn't know how to fit in. I felt different, and then I was condemned for being different because I was being selfish. And there were words that were used because you didn't fit in and it wasn't understood. It then becomes selfish. And so I felt like a misfit and alienated because I'm not fitting in.
Yeah. I mean, you were changing things even before. You were changing them in your 30s and stuff, but you didn't realize it. You didn't put the words to it until your 40s, like you said. But so, as you're talking about inner culture, what I'm thinking of is you got engaged at 13, then you got married at 19, then your dad's death. And those were some of the things that happened to you. And they were out of your control, right? It was like not something that you could do. And then you say that you started to explore your inner culture in the 30s. So, that's making me think that all of those things were out of your control. So you weren't even able to explore yourself. You didn't have the time, you didn't have the luxury or in your control to explore who you actually are on the inside. But, as Desis, and in our Desi culture, we don't have the opportunity to even do that. And so that's what I'm sort of picking up as, like, in your experience that happened to you then when you took control of it in the 30s, not knowing what to do, where to go from there.
So true, because I think, generally speaking, life is always going to happen and we have to respond to life. We have to do something.
Yeah.
And not knowing how to do things that meet what I need as a human being. And that's not told to me what I need. Because a lot of the times we think because we have kids that we know them and we know what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that every parent makes every decision from that place. Like, I don't think there's any parent that says, oh, I want her to have a miserable life.
They try
And
their
that's why,
best, yeah.
yeah, they're doing their best with what they know and how they know it.
And their beliefs.
And their beliefs and their cultural influences and what is supposed to be right and wrong. And
Right.
I removed the right and wrong from my life. And for one reason, because when life was happening to me, I was not feeling like, I felt that there were challenges, there were traumas,
Mhm.
there were tests, right? And I think everything happens for one reason, and that's for us to get to know ourselves better.
Mm.
And what we do is, because we don't know this piece, we always point it outward, expecting someone to bring us our happiness, expecting someone to come save us, expecting someone to do things to make us feel happy.
Mm. And that's what we've been talking about in all the other episodes, some of those things. So you said all of those things were for you in your journey to get to know yourself. So tell me more about that. How did you do that? And what were, like, it's not, there's so many things involved in this whole concept of getting to know yourself. And what does it do for us? And how do we get there to get to know yourself? How did you do it?
So that's a big question.
Yeah.
That's a huge question.
Mm-hmm.
How, we evolve as people. And one thing I did was, and this is all after my 44th birthday.
Oh, okay.
So unconsciously, I was evolving until my 44th birthday. We're
Right.
always evolving, growing, and becoming. But at 44, a life event happened that led me to my breakdown. And it was at that time I realized that life is breaking me whole, not breaking me into pieces. That these challenges that we have are actually for us to become our truest version of ourselves, to gain our authentic power and to access our full potential.
Wow.
And that for me was the most liberating part of my life. That is when I had to put down things that had been taught, not to make them right or wrong, but to allow myself to breathe and come into this person that was no longer from one culture, but a compilation from three cultures. And the three cultures were, because we were brought up we were born in Pakistan, and we came to England and lived in England for a few years before coming to Canada. So we were influenced by the places we lived.
Yeah.
And I was always conflicted between what to do, because this isn't right. And then I felt like I had to rebel my truest self, my full version. And often we have to. But I realized also that I had very low self-worth because I didn't receive the support that I needed. And so, I feel like this is another topic that I often think about, is that emotional support that we need, right? And that's not, like you were saying, our traditional families, we're not geared. We're geared to nurture and give, but not emotionally support.
Yeah.
And so,
even though we're all about collectivism, but that emotional support is not there at all. Physical is sometimes.
Yeah. And so what was your question again?
My question was, how did you get to know yourself? You said this whole journey was to getting to know yourself from the things. Yeah.
And so how I got to know myself was later, because I thought I knew myself and everything I was doing. And I think often we think we know ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We all know ourselves. And I didn't realize there's this part of becoming yourself. So as the challenges happened, as all these things that happened that told me that this is not what I want. See, in hindsight, here's what I know. Life happens for two reasons. One reason is to show us what we want more of. And the second one is to show us what we want less of. And challenges and traumas and experiences are life's form of intervention to help us reconnect with ourselves.
Yeah. And we don't see that at all. We think challenges are, oh my God, my life sucks. Oh my God, I have the worst life ever because I'm getting all these problems and stuff.
And so that's number one. That was that realization that life is these situations and circumstances that are happening to me are life's way of intervention to help me connect with myself. Just knowing that there's a reason behind this is happening. The second thing that helped me to get to know myself was really addressing all the broken parts of me. So putting the microscope on the pains and the situations and circumstances that happen so that my mind and my heart can be reconciled. Because just being in my mind, I was locking up a part, reframing. I've been the biggest and the most positive person for my whole life. And what that was positivity and reframing was doing was dismissing my human experience.
Yeah.
And so that was the second thing, recognizing that emotions and what I feel and what I think have to be reconciled. I have to make sense for myself by consciously looking at the parts that make me feel broken, that I'm trying to shut and put away. So rather than suppressing my emotions now, I'm actually looking at it. And the vision I'm having right now is you're in the hospital and someone's doing an operation on you, and they're trying to find where the problem is, and then they're fixing that problem. So this whole thing was for me to not fix myself, because I think that we are all imperfectly perfect, and this is a cliche that we hear all the time, but it definitely is like just acknowledging that I'm okay the way I am, that self-acceptance piece.
Yeah.
And then rising up, saying that I know I'm something different than what I know myself to be. To become myself means that I get to access my full potential, not the potential what others define for me, my culture or my family or my friends. Like, be unlimited in who I am.
So that was my next question, was that you sort of answered it, but I was going to ask, in all of this realization that you were having, did you also realize that it is the cultural beliefs that are your thoughts sometimes come to you and you need to separate and you need to realize your feeling and all of these other realizations that you have? Was it that you were able to pinpoint the cultural aspect of it that it had on you, the impact on your thoughts?
Yes. So for me, how I became aware that there was an influence in me or in my mind, in my belief systems, was when I started working on my mind powers and my mindset. And I hired a life coach. And through that process of that coaching, what happened was I started beginning to separate my thoughts and my beliefs. And how each decision I was making was influenced by that belief. And some of those beliefs that I was being influenced by were not serving me, like the role of a woman, right? See, for me, one of the beliefs was that I can't do life on my own, that I need someone to protect me, to help me, to do all these things.
That's our cultural belief for women, dependency.
Dependency, exactly, that I was dependent on my family, on my friends, or someone. That dependency was there. So that was underlying. And I had to become independent, not to defy cultural norms, to be self-sufficient. As a single mother, I still had this blockage.
Yeah.
And also that the men in the family are the providers. And for me to exceed their earning potential, I capped my own. And this happened because it would be disrespectful. The belief is if you do something that is better than someone else, then it's disrespectful. So we create our own ceilings through our beliefs.
Absolutely. Especially if it's a man. So disrespectful.
Yeah. And or your parents. Or your mother, it was there. There were so many things that were capping me. Even in our growth, like I work with clients that have had the same thing, that, one person's father only earned $75,000 a year. That was his income. But and he wanted to have this more than that. But anytime he got into a position where that opportunity was present, what happened is he didn't get the job because of his belief that if he earns more than his father, there's disrespect. And when he was able to find that, he was able to get that position that paid double that, and then subsequently even more than that. So that belief, we don't realize it's like a saran wrap it's like we're wearing an invisible glove. It's there, but we don't see it. That's how beliefs work. So for me, when I was able to use through the coaching, learned about John Kehoe and did the mind power program. And for me, and that's what I use when I'm coaching, I think that we need a tune up in our minds. We take our cars for repair. We take our, if there's a dent in the wall of our home, we get it repaired. If our washing machine breaks down, we get it repaired. Or we service it. And my mind in 44 years had never had a service. So I started putting things now that I'm doing the servicing of my mind, I was separating my thoughts from my feelings, from my behavior. And I was learning where I was the part of the problem. And I say this a lot. We have to recognize, where are you the part of the problem? So I started saying, oh my God, I'm letting that happen and taking responsibility. So recognizing that it's not one thing. Like we look like one piece, right? We're all together. But there's that funny phrase, me, myself, and I. All three of us are here right now. So me is who I am right now. Myself is the person that I'm becoming. And I am a whole being. Like, I'm not broken. All me.
Okay. So that's really interesting about the mindset, mind power. I'm also studying that, and I'm still, learning it. But then you said that you learned about the different pieces of it, and then you plugged stuff in there. So what are the things? What did you put in there? How did you know what to put in there? How did you know what you want to be, and what were those things that led you to believe who you want to be, to put that in there?
Right. So I became my best friend. And what do you do for your best friend? You listen to them, you talk to them, you try to understand them. And so I became my best friend. And in becoming my best friend, I started asking myself questions. Because if I am already going to tell myself who I am, I'm going to recreate everything over and over again. So one decision was that I didn't want the next 10 years to look like my last. And they didn't.
Awesome.
And it wasn't always what I was. See, the thing is, we have to choose the layer of our lives we're trying to change. And when we start doing it, it's a journey. It's not a destination. Knowing yourself is a journey. And the beauty of knowing yourself is, or at least for me, the beauty of knowing myself was that I did know things about myself, and understanding that I didn't know things about myself. And that every event that was happening to me was helping me to access my potential of being that fullest self. So that's the change in life. Wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me. And it didn't dismiss the trauma. Like, it's not to say that trauma didn't happen or that someone didn't hurt you. It was more about taking the power back, bringing the power back to me, and saying, how can I change that? And healing was a big part of it. Like, feeling was a big part of it. So another thing, you were saying, how did you get to know yourself, is really feeling. Like I said, looking at the broken parts, that requires you to feel. And once you start feeling, you allow yourself to heal.
What do you mean by feeling?
I'll explain what I mean by feeling. I stopped being positive because I glorified or dismissed what I was feeling. And then it up in reaction. So what I mean by feeling is, I would say, I'm really hurt. This really hurts me. Or I'm feeling really sad.
Acknowledging those painful feelings. Okay.
Acknowledging the pain, seeing, and then, when I have those moments, I can see the events that happen to me over and over and over again. If I don't acknowledge, there's triggers. But if I start acknowledging, what happens is those triggers start dissipate, because there's a mouth for them to leave. And when we suppress our emotions,
Mm.
what happens is they show up in our lives. So I became proactive versus reactive. And healing helps us address our those triggers, right?
Because when we're feeling something and it's a painful feeling, we don't want to feel it, like we just want to get rid of it. And it's so much easier to just not think about it, let it go, and but I guess acknowledging it and maybe even thinking, why do I feel like that? But it's so hard to I guess, like you were saying, account for it, make yourself accountable for that feeling, whatever it is.
Yeah. So I have a term that I use. I don't believe in letting it go.
Okay.
Because letting it go means I have to get rid of it. And it's very hard to get rid of things when you have memories and emotions attached to it. How do you let it go?
And thoughts, yeah.
Right? Because thoughts that are emotionalized are magnetized and attract similar and like thoughts. So if we're trying to let go of a thought that we've emotionalized so deeply, that's going to haunt us along the way. I like to say, let it flow. When we let it flow, we let it go.
Oh, that's so good, Rabia, because I've heard the let it go so much. Michael Singer, his book Untethered Soul is all about let it go, let it go.
But let it flow so that it can leave. See, letting it go is sort of an action.
Yeah.
So a few years ago on Women's Day, International Women's Day, we had a gathering. I had a gathering for the Goddess Group, and I had lots of balloons. And it's to make that conscious decision that you're going to let something go. So at the end of the event, everyone got a balloon and they had the opportunity to let something go.
Wow.
But that balloon flowed, right? It went up slowly, but it went up slowly, right? It didn't just reach the sky in a second. So it flowed up. So that's how we rise. We rise to our whole selves. Like we are always whole, but we don't always feel whole. We don't always feel worthy. We're always worthy.
That's a great analogy, because we made the conscious decision of letting it go first by processing it and feeling it. But now you said we don't know that we are worthy. What does that mean?
Because in a world that's always telling us we're doing something wrong and devaluing us of who we are, and we're not taught to find worth in ourselves. It's almost like we have to prove ourselves to be worthy, not a natural disposition, worthy and of value.
And whatever we do is not enough. It's not enough to prove.
And I think that not enough is two parts. One, the world tells us that we're not enough because we're failing or we're doing things wrong. We're not the good mother, or we're not a good sister because we're not doing something.
Bad Muslim.
A bad Muslim. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when we're not totally fully understood, we start believing people, the people that we care about most. And when any time someone pokes at us and criticizes us, we do feel it. We do take it personally. It hurts. And it's like someone is deflating us. So our self-esteem, back to that balloon, that self-esteem is being poked at. Small pokes, small pokes, small pokes. And the balloon is losing air. And it's deflating until that last hole when everything is gone. So our self-worth is contingent on our self-confidence, and self-esteem is important to survive and get through life. But what happens is the way to nurture those things to have self-value and self-worth is by recognizing that I'm worthy of self-care. By injecting into ourselves, infusing ourselves with the feelings and the thoughts that align to who we are. By spending time with ourselves. We like you said, we run from those emotions, right?
Yeah, it's painful.
It's painful. So what do? We keep ourselves busy so we don't have to listen.
Yes, ignore it. Don't let it come out.
But how do we ignore it? Well, because we hate being alone and being in our thoughts, because anytime we're in our thoughts, we feel that pain. So a lot of people can't be alone because they're alone, they're in these thoughts.
Or there's different ways of dealing with it, like substance abuse or anything else you could be doing to not let them come out.
Exactly. And avoid, and all of those habits that we sometimes, these things that we go to as a form of suppressing, avoiding, delaying, deferring the inevitable. So these are all things, just delay that time.
Yeah.
Because eventually that balloon will be filled with holes or that Swiss cheese that I've spoken about.
Yeah.
But that balloon will be so, all the air will be gone in that balloon and you'll feel rock bottom. That's how I felt. It's like somebody's poking away and I'm so dependent on someone giving me love that I forgot to give myself love in the process. And I was having a conversation just yesterday on Clubhouse about self-worth, actually about relationships, right?
Okay.
And like conflicts and relationships, like conscious relationships and unconscious conflict.
Unconscious conflicts. Okay. Right. I remember.
Ending unconscious conflicts. And so knowing that there is a conflict inside of us, like nurturing that place. Why do these things show up? So anything that happens on the outside in our life is a conflict when we don't like it.
Yeah.
There's a battle going on.
Oh, wow. Cool. Unconscious conflict. And in our Desi culture, there's so many unconscious conflicts within us, in our relationships, our family dynamics and stuff like that. But we have, like, you're right, we probably have so many of those internally too within us. So you said about self-esteem. And so what were some of the things that made you realize that it is really the self-esteem that you are lacking in your journey of, like, in how, when you were in your rebelling phase, what was it that made you pinpoint it that it was my self-esteem and that I need to build my self-worth?
I think all of us, we have that voice inside us that keeps telling us we're not good enough. We're not good enough. We're not, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. We've been programmed to believe that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And that we don't have what it takes. And so what made me realize that I'm worthy, and actually, I'll be speaking at an event at the You Are Worthy Summit in Atlanta next month, actually, in end of June. And I'm going to be sharing a workshop on how to access, and this is the very first time that I'll be sharing it with the public, that accessing that self-worth really means that you've got to look at the parts that are broken, but also you've got to infuse yourself with who you believe yourself to be and pour that love in. Self-care is a big part of it. I had to do a lot of affirmations.
Okay.
For me, filling my tank was, and I call it the tank, like we have a tank. It's like driving a car with no gas in it. And so we have to fill ourselves with love, with care. Like we go to we'll go to the nail salon and get our nails done.
Yeah.
We'll go for our threading and we'll go for our facial. And that's great. That's pampering. But that's a part of self-care. Another part of self-care is by seeing yourself and getting clear about that inner culture and creating that inner standing. So this is a term that I didn't make up. I actually learned in one of the courses that there's there's an understanding and there is an inner standing.
Wow, that is so powerful. Like you said about self-care, and in my past too, I would always think, well, I'm going to go get my hair done. And it's cliche. All these things are cliche: self-care, self-love, self-worthiness. This is how I'm supposed to care for myself. I'm supposed to go get my hair done. I'm supposed to go get my nails done. But you're right. It's that inner culture and that inner talk and that inner discussion, inner conflict. We don't, I wouldn't even ever think that's how it was supposed to be done.
And then just by doing this, I realized that I don't need anyone anymore. I can live this life. This is going to sound a little black and white. Part of this journey is a little black and white.
Okay.
So this is one of those black and white phases. And this is kind of like a first step. Make this decision that you don't need anyone. It doesn't mean that you can't get help or ask for help, but it's saying that you are self-sufficient. You're resourceful. See, taking your power back means you say, I'm resourceful. I can go to people for help. They don't have to read my mind and come to me. See, that victim mentality is someone's going to save me.
Yeah.
But you start saving yourself first. You start creating that space. So that gap between the person that can actually guide you and be your mentor and be your confidant and your friend or your coach or your doctor, that you meet them somewhere. You can't just stay where you are and expect the whole world to come to you. You've got to move, and you've got to have the mood to move.
Yeah.
And so I have this, I don't have it here, but I'll find it and share it so we can post it somewhere. I was trying to figure out what's going on in my life. So there's this timeline. So I'm here in the beginning, and this is where I'm going. So I'm trying to keep it within the screen here. And so this is where we're going. What happens is we do the work, we move up. But what we do is we get stuck at a certain place. We find our life going in circles.
Yeah.
And when we go in circles, we think we're moving because we are moving. When we come back to the same place. So one of the intentions of this workshop is to recognize this and then actually end up on the other side rather than creating this looping motion. Every time someone takes something from us, we go back to square one. So there is a difference between moving forward and moving forward with worth. And so recognizing that I am powerful. See, I recently heard something, Melinda Gates actually said this, and I loved it. And she said that it's one thing to empower people, but it's another thing to find your power. And self-worth, I believe, is finding your power. Your authentic power is who you are, but finding your power to be and do what you want is also important. And finding that power is your self-worth in motion.
So I'm interested to know in that, what were some of the cultural challenges or barriers that you faced in this journey of you realizing your self-worth and your self-esteem and breaking those beliefs in your mind?
Cultural barriers were that in order to stand up for myself, I would be disrespecting someone.
Yeah.
That was a big one. And I think that was the main one. That me saying I am not like you or that I am different was disrespectful. So how could I ever be myself? And so I had to develop a new relationship with all these words: respect, love, understanding. So it's context. Its beliefs are context. We have a context to what respect looks like because of cultural values. And the thing that I had to actually, the thing that was most changing for me, life-changing for me, was asking myself, how do these beliefs serve? Not saying right or wrong, but how do they work for me or against me? And then understanding there's an inner culture and an outer culture. And saying, okay, so if this belief doesn't serve me, what is a belief of greater value that does? And when we start understanding our value, and I think life is all about our values, when we start living into our values, then we feel worthy. We feel like we're honoring ourselves because this is important to me. See, telling the truth is important to me, but if I'm constantly lying, I'm devaluing.
So knowing your values and staying true to your values builds the self-worth.
Because it requires you to stand up to them, to speak the truth. And speaking the truth isn't always well received. It's not always validated. And then the second thing is knowing that, standing up for yourself and knowing that you won't be validated. Be willing to stand alone. Be willing to be true to yourself in your truth, not someone else's.
Yeah, but willing also, it's like willing to know that you won't be surrounded with the people that you thought you might. Willing to stand alone.
We discussed this in a previous episode, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this in much more detail about that willing to stand alone, but knowing that people aren't going to support you, and the people that you want the support from, especially, they will not support you because they have an idea of you that you left behind. But they still think that person's here.
Old you.
And sometimes those are so upgrade, downgrade, yes, but also we heal. Both people aren't healed from that event. That reoccurrence of that event is going to happen each time they meet each other, because they're going to remember. You have an impression of what Rabia is like, but if we have a miscommunication or a fight, then every time I show up, that unless we resolve that fight's going to show up, and I'm going to be reactive in that time. I'll show up with the passive aggressive comment. I'll show up with nasty instead of kindness, that nasty language instead of kind, respectful language.
Yeah.
Right. And I see my life, this is how it was. That if I didn't deal with something, and then you get these elephants in the room, right? And then all of these thoughts that you have, you're criticizing someone else. I think that when we criticize other people, we're criticizing ourselves. And we're criticizing ourselves. We're taking so the spark tank, I call it actually. We take one spark out, or we can deposit a spark. We can take the spark out, or life takes the sparks out.
Yeah.
That's what life is there for. But it's to tell you that you can put the sparks back in. And that's how we develop our self-worth. And when our tank is full, when we're running on a full tank of sparks, of resonance, of love, of understanding and inner standing, and knowing the inner culture with a knowingness, like not just knowledge, but knowingness, that's when you can access that true authentic power.
Knowingness.
Self-knowing, and also knowing other people, and then having the boundaries to know how much you allow. Boundaries is a form of self-worth as well.
Boundaries, yeah. And like you said, that willing to stand alone and willing to take that knowing that I am disrespect, like you said, right? It was a challenge that you are disrespecting the culture belief. But for me, acknowledging, like taking in that disrespect was hard. Like I felt guilty for that I am disrespecting everyone or hurting everyone, right? I felt so guilty for that. Did you have those type of feelings as a result of, the cultural challenge? And how did you deal with that?
Guilt? Oh, yes. Guilt and shame, both. They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And also the third thing is regret. Guilt, shame, and regret.
Yes.
So these three things are actually a part of a workshop that I have called the Audacious Self-Acceptance. And self-acceptance is a huge part of finding self-worth. Dealing with guilt, regret, and shame all three was the journey for me.
Okay.
I constantly felt guilt.
Yeah.
I'm doing, like, that voice in my head was when I was being myself, that I felt that I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
That made me feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because my culture and what I'd seen before me and what was the considered norm, I wasn't doing it. So practice makes progress. See, anytime you do anything for the first time, the old self of the doubt, fear, and regret, and remorse, and guilt and shame will come up. But as you keep practicing it, it gets less and less. So I asked myself throughout every step of the way, what would I regret more? It's not about having regrets. What would you regret more? Not being true to yourself. And no, I had a knowing. And my knowing was that whatever I'm doing is for the best of all. It wasn't selfish. A lot of the things I did were selfish, but the underlying reason was selflessness. And that self-care that was perceived as selfish, the boundaries that were perceived as selfish, the no's that were perceived as selfish were actually the ways I was filling my tank for myself. That was a part of my self-care. It wasn't perceived well because it meant that we had to shift and change the relationship. And I'll just make it a blanket they didn't have the control over me as they once did. That it would mean that they have to change as well with me.
Yeah, I never thought of that they have to change as well with you.
But you have to give them the space and the time and the love. After having that boundary. So boundaries is just one step. You also have to give yourself all of that to let them come towards you, but you also have to move towards them, because every relationship is based on two people's needs. Like between two people, they're two people's needs. One person cannot come all the way ever. But the understanding in our culture, to bring it back to our culture, is the woman is molded. She's the supporting role in her life. She doesn't have the main character role in her life.
Yeah.
That collectivism that we talked about, that inter relationship.
Yeah. And the ones that do speak up, or the ones that say something that we don't belong, we're not misfits, or we want to do something different, they're shunned out. They're not listened to. And I think, like you're saying, it's hard for even them to come and try to meet in the middle, or make them understand, or make both of the parties understand, because we don't talk to ourselves. We don't even know what these feelings are. We don't know the communication aspect of it. and they're just shunned out. And then we just have this separation.
Yeah. And so a lot of the times the Stockholm syndrome shows up. And I'm just having these downloads right now. And I'm seeing my life in front of me and some situations. And actually, I have this image of a few things and people in my life. And I'm seeing how justifying behavior shows up, like the Stockholm syndrome shows up. Even when it's wrong, we tend to gravitate toward the male. And this happened in my life, in my personal experiences. The females in my life supported the male that was wrong. And that's a part of that Stockholm syndrome. And that Stockholm syndrome is a cultural condition. Sympathize with the abuser.
Justify it, make an excuse for it, give it a reasoning.
And another word that was coming up is the imposter syndrome. That me, as when I'm taking these steps and that doubt, shame, fear, guilt showing up, it's that imposter syndrome that's saying you can't do it.
You're not good enough.
Yeah, all imposter syndrome. You're not good enough. You're not, this is not going to happen. You don't have the support. You're not smart. You're not capable. You don't have it. And so another aspect of that self-worth that you were speaking about is infusing yourself with, I am worthy. Infusing yourself with, I am capable of healing. I am resilient. See, I am resourceful. I don't have all the answers, but this is what I do have. I don't know how to get there, but this is who I know myself to be. So start acknowledging those values. And when I was saying previously about being honest, I think also a part of it is being transparent with yourself. It's about being naked with yourself with all your clothes on. Going into your emotions it's addressing a very vulnerable part of ourselves. And vulnerability is, in our culture, not highly respected.
Not in the emotional sense. Totally.
And vulnerability is always in the emotional.
But they want women to be vulnerable otherwise, like physically vulnerable. Men is going to take care of you. You have to get married. You can't be unmarried for long,
Right. Submissive.
Submissive.
Vulnerable is emotional. Submissive is servicing, like serving.
Okay. So self-worth, I mean, that it's such a cliche sentence, right? But like you're saying, there's so much more involved in that. It's that self-knowledge, the actions that you're taking for yourself, the feelings that you're allowing yourself to feel, the thoughts that you're putting in your mind. It's so much more than that. But in the society, when it's always heard, know your worth, it's really such a cliche. It's so much more than that. It's so involved.
Yeah, and I think there's I think the general perception is that self-worth is an ego based thing, that
I'm all that, I deserve this, I can get the best, that's it.
So there's an opposite of the imposter syndrome.
Okay. Because it kind of makes me, I used to think that it's kind of borderlines with narcissism, the way that self-worth is portrayed.
Yes, and that term is the Dunning-Kruger effect.
What is it again? Dunning?
Dunning, hyphen Kruger, Krueger effect. So that's the opposite of the imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And that's when you think you're too good. So the problem in our lives is that we're either not enough or we're too good. We're either not worthy or we're too worthy. And when we're too and not enough, too much of something or not enough of something, we're actually the same thing, insecure.
Yeah, because that too good feeling is also based on you don't know yourself fully on the inside. You don't know your values.
So I've had a lot of, through my friends and my clients, what I see is that when people can't have relationships is that they think they're not worthy enough, or they think they're too good for someone. So if you're not enough for someone or too good for someone, how can you ever have a relationship with them?
Yes. And how can you even have a good relationship, even if you do have the relationship?
Right. And so understanding of the inner culture, like determining that there is something within me that I don't know, or that I'm not living my fullest self, my fullest version. of myself. And I have a problem with, people saying your best self or your highest self. I find that a little bit toxic positive.
Okay.
Because you don't give your other parts an opportunity to breathe. So being your full self is more important. Showing up as your whole self is more important.
No, I was just going to say full self versus best self. So what's the problem with the best self?
There's no problem with the best self.
Okay.
In your fullest version, all parts of you will show up.
Oh, the good and the bad.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. It'll all show up. And the reason it's important for it to show up is so that you can work on them. But if you don't give it the chance to show up, what happens is it'll create situations for you that will make you feel either not enough or too good.
Yeah, that's so cool because our society, that the worth concept, it just so portrays that. So you said earlier that you're getting this download and you're seeing your life pass by you and you're seeing the people pass by you. Who are some of the people that you feel like helped you to get here and who were a big part of this whole journey of yours?
So there are lots of people in my life that have influenced and said things to me that have led me to where I am.
Okay.
Or that have given me the courage to be and become who I am. And I think that's the key. They have given me permission without knowing that's what they were doing, perhaps, to give me permission to be myself. There are a few people. So the first person is my father. He poured love into me. He didn't realize that he was my biggest cheerleader. Then someone came into my life who actually saw the goodness in me. And I won't name them, but they saw the goodness in me. And they actually reminded me of everything my father used to tell me. And I felt that that person came into my life to remind me of what my father saw in me. And then the third person that has really influenced and shaped me is I met Shahid Khan in 2014. And meaning it was a great experience to meet him. But there was one takeaway that I took from that really changed everything. He said to me, be yourself, just be yourself. And so that really shaped me.
Okay.
And the fourth person I want to give credit to is myself, because we often don't give ourselves credit and or appreciate ourselves. And so I started saying thank you to myself, started honoring myself because everything that I've done, good, bad, and otherwise, I've done it. So I showed the parts that have not lived up to my expectations, that what I wanted, with compassion. And then giving myself the chances to become that person, not just label myself unworthy. Oh, you'll never get it right. Oh, I stopped having that conversation with myself. I see it. It still happens. It still shows up. It will always show up. It doesn't go away, but replace. So there are 3 words that have really impacted my life on top of these 4 people. My mother and my siblings, everyone has shaped me, but these 4 and my children. So, and I have to say, my kids, I've learned more from them than I've taught them.
That's powerful.
They have placed the mirror in front of me many times. They, by saying that we saw what you did, we didn't hear what you said. That was the most that one line, and I say this often because we lead by example, not by preaching.
Yeah.
And when we fall short of our preaching, sometimes we should be able to acknowledge it for ourselves and say, I'll do better.
Accountability.
And also giving ourselves the time and space to develop the skills to do it better. Responsibility, accountability, but also the compassion and love to be able to walk into that, to become that. Because we're creatures of habit. We repeat what we've done most. And to overcome certain things, it takes time.
Yeah. I think what you said about, this whole process, it's being a journey and it being a process. That's also so much, it makes sense because we think in normal context that I want to get to the end result, right? I just want to get to the other side. I just want it to be this thing to be over, but it's really never really over, right? It's just a process and it's a journey. All of it is a part of it.
Yep. And I will always be a work in progress. There are many destinations.
Yeah.
And it's a process and progress. It's a process and progress. It's not, there's no end.
Yeah. There's no other side.
It's been about unmasking. We have a lot of masks, and it's about unmasking and being comfortable with the skin I'm in.
I was just going to say being comfortable in the skin you're in. So like accepting all of you, accepting everything about you.
Yeah, and being comfortable with it. The acceptance is I accept myself, but am I comfortable with it? And that comes with the healing.
So, it's really interesting that every single thing that you did and how you got over the cultural challenges and barriers, because you were doing all of this like a few years before and for you to go through those things and me to go through those almost similar things, years later, but for you to do all of that and stand up and do all of that inner work and to realize and become aware and be able to stand up against the cultural barrier in that time. And I think back, in a few years ago when you were doing it, it probably wasn't that common. And I feel like there is a little bit more awareness now, especially with the whole mental health situation and the way things are in the Western society. Anyway, it has come out a little bit more. But it must have, felt so weird going against the tide, doing something so different than what everyone else around you was doing.
Actually, it was the easiest thing I've ever done.
Really?
So I stopped running from things.
Okay.
And I started running towards. So when you're running away from things, it's really hard. Pushing things away, you're going against the flow. But when you're coming towards, it's just so easy and natural. For me, it was easy because I knew that running and living the other way is not working. Like I wasn't out to defy cultural norms.
Okay.
I was trying to remove what wasn't working, repair what I loved and wasn't working perfectly, and then remove what I'd removed, replace them with better serving theories, ideas, actions, thoughts.
Yeah.
And then I knew my heart's in the right place. And there's no perfection. Perfectionism is like the killer, and that there's a huge part in our culture that wants you to be perfect. And so perfectionism was the killer, and accepting myself was accepting that I will never be perfect, that I'm human, and the very thing that I am is conditioned to be imperfect, is born to be imperfect, and here I am trying to be perfect. Meaning and that's not to say that I haven't learned or that I don't know, but there's always going to be more to know and understand than I already have. And that's the development and growth, right? Personal development and then personal growth. Growth is what shows up. Development is what we learn.
Nice. And so what was it that made you go down this journey of counseling and spreading your message across and talking about mental health? And also, did you get any pushback while you were doing that?
So what made me go down this path of self-awareness and self-love and taking care of my mental health?
Yeah.
Life wasn't working. I had outgrown my life. I didn't adapt to a new way of living. So my life didn't fit me anymore the way it was. So, when you outgrow clothes, kids outgrow clothes, you go buy them new clothes.
Yeah.
So I had to find a new way. That's number one. Number two, did I get pushback? Yeah, I got the resistance.
Okay.
People didn't just say, oh, go do it. There weren't those cheerleaders there. We want you to feel comfortable. We want you to be happy. It was always about someone else's happiness.
Yeah.
Don't do this because it doesn't make me happy. Or don't do that because it makes me uncomfortable, whether I was comfortable with it or not.
So it was always about that. But so I just want to know about the cultural pushback. Did you get it? Cultural people saying, well, we don't like you anymore or anything like that?
Yes. And I see not everyone's for me and I'm not for everyone. And that I received, the pushback, or people left me, and I just had a belief, and I do have a belief that no one leaves me.
Yeah.
That a lot of people left and came back, and a lot of people didn't come back. But the ones I wanted back, I worked for.
Okay. You work on those relationships.
The relationships that I want to have, I will make the effort and time to build. And I'll also be patient and give other people the space.
Yeah. So, we always ask this from our other guests, but I also really want to know from you, if you were to go back and do something differently, what would it be?
A few things, actually, to be honest with you. I would do a few things differently. I would find my healing faster.
Yeah.
I would have, in hindsight, everything is 2020.
Yeah.
And so knowing what I know, I would have definitely worked on my grief from my dad's death
Right.
much sooner. I would have addressed a lot of the elephants in my house. I would have been proactive about the disagreements and the conflicts with people rather than reactive. And I would probably have not rebelled as much if I had taken care of that.
Yeah.
And because the biggest lesson that I took from this journey, and I am taking from this journey, is really not necessarily addressing how I hurt myself and how other people hurt me, but how I hurt other people unintentionally. And the impact of that for me was harder to reconcile with than everything that everyone else had done. So I would hurt people less if I was healed, because there's a quote, a phrase that says, hurt people hurt. And when you're so deep in your hurt, you don't realize you're hurting people.
Yeah.
And the people I've hurt are the ones that are most important. And that's why I'm willing to work with for that.
Yeah.
And it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah. But it was unintentional hurt, like you said. It's not like you did
but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If this is another big conversation. When we unintentionally hurt people, the answer isn't, I didn't do it with intention. That doesn't change how the impact of what happened on the person. So it's almost gaslighting their feelings.
Yeah.
So, when someone says to me, it wasn't intentional, I just think for gaslighting. Not to them, sometimes just to myself.
In your mind, yeah.
And sometimes to them, depending on who they are.
Well, I think, Rabia, your journey is a really, really inspiring one. And you already know that it's really motivating to me. And as well as at the same time, it's the support, it's the knowing that there is somebody else who kind of feels the same way as you. And I'm sure there's many others who can relate and resonate to everything that you have said and you have gone through. And I think that it's so empowering what you did in the times that you did it, when it wasn't even that common and things like that. And what you continue to do every single day is leading by example and spreading that message across.
Yeah, two things. Finding self-love and just showing up as yourself is the best gift you can give to yourself and to the world. And it's very easy to be yourself.
I think it's the hardest thing to do ever.
It's hard, but it's easy. There's so many dichotomies. It's easy to be yourself. It's harder to become, the work to do to get there. But it's really easy. I can't be anyone else, right? So that's number one. And number two, I think that when we share, no matter where we are, how evolved, how much we've learned, what we've done to become a coach, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Wherever you are so powerful in that place that you are. And you've got something to say that will make a difference for someone else.
Yeah.
There are always people ahead of us, and there are always people behind us in that evolution of themselves. And so I want to share one thing that really speaks to me. There's some songs that have really made a difference for me along the way. One was Natasha Bedingfield, Unwritten. It's about the book that's unwritten. We become ourselves. It hasn't become our lived reality, but we know it's in us. And taking this journey inwards, discovering that self-worth, reinventing the inner culture to find harmony in the outer culture, and reinventing cultural norms. The second song was kind of like an ego song that I was electric.
Okay.
I would sing this, I'm electric. I would sing to myself. And I remember driving in the cars and how it just made me come alive.
Yeah.
And the third one is A Song for Someone by U2. And A Song for Someone, I feel that when we share our experiences and our lessons and our heartache, it's a message for someone. And I just want to say these lines. If there is a light you can't always see, and there is a world we can't always be, if there is a dark that we shouldn't doubt, and there is a light, don't let it go out.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's from that song that you were just saying?
Yes. This song, these words, the key word is there is a light, don't let it go out.
It's really cool how it's like you said, there were some people and there were some life-changing moments that did that. And now you're saying songs. So it's really interesting how it's some of these things that we encounter that, really help us through the process and can become these milestones for us and become turning points.
Yes.
So it was an amazing episode. I loved learning more about you, but I feel like there's still a lot that we need to unpack, and we will do that in a future episode.
So Sana, thank you so much for being you, first of all, and asking so many amazing questions and being curious and supportive and acknowledging what we are doing as a collective, as you and I, and that what I've done in my journey and what you have done in your journey. And I look forward to interviewing you as well, to hear from you, because your story is inspiring, and we have different stories, different understandings of our inner world and inner culture. So I'm looking forward to being on the other side and taking your interview as well.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to it too. And I'm glad you don't mind my questions, because, my curiosity is, my understanding of everything is, questions.
I appreciate that. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. And so, yeah.
So it's that time of the episode, Rabia.
Yes. So we're two Desi girls.
Reinventing cultural norms.
With love.
With love. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the Rabia and Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.
See you next time.